Shavua Tov, everybody, which means good week. This week's Torah reading was Parshat Shoftim. It discusses judges. Let me give you my perspective in a speech that I delivered this morning. We can't record it on the Shabbat, so here I am. I believe that there's an eternal conflict that rages within each and every one of us between being and doing. In other words, we all want to be special in life. That's the greatest human need, the greatest human desire. How can we be significant? How can we distinguish ourselves? We live with this innate belief that we are special. But there's two ways to go about being special. Either through being, you're special because of something you are, you're someone's child, you're loved. You're someone's spouse, you're adored. You're someone's parent, you're appreciated. That's the being modality. The other is doing. You made a lot of money, so you're special. You're a famous model, so you're special. You have a lot of titles, suffixes at the end of your name because of degrees that you got, you're special. Being and doing. And I think that we're always conflicted between these two. We're all afraid to some degree that we don't matter. That's the greatest human fear. The greatest human fear, the mother of all fears, and I wrote about this in my book, Face Your Fear, is that maybe we're inconsequential. Isn't that why we fear death? Why would people fear death? Maybe there's something better on the other side. Maybe there's a world more truthful. Maybe there's a world that's more wholesome. The reason we fear death is that our whole life people have told us, I love you, you're irreplaceable. If something happened to you, my world would end. And guess what? One day, God forbid, you're not going to wake up. And the whole thing was a lie. They're going to continue without you. You didn't matter all that much anyway. You were not as vital. You were not as pivotal as you thought. We all live with that fear that maybe I don't matter. And we spend our life trying to prove that we do matter, that we are consequential. And we do it again either through being. I'm going to prove that I matter by being a family person, by having relationships that are not dependent on what I do, or you're going to matter through achievement, through productivity. So in this week's Torah reading, this conflict is brought out in a famous biblical passage where before the Jewish army goes out to battle, the priest comes before the people and he says to the soldiers, if any of you are afraid, you better go home, or you will infect the entire army with your cowardice. And then he says three things. If one of you got engaged to a woman, if you didn't marry her, go home. If one of you planted a vineyard and you haven't yet consecrated it, go home. And finally, if one of you built a home, but you have not yet consecrated it fully, lived in it, then go home. Sounds a little bit odd. What a strange speech. But it comes down to what we were saying. You see, we all live with this terrible fear that maybe we don't matter. And the priest is saying, if you're going out into the battle of life, if you're going out into the battle of in the marketplace, the war of commerce, of ideas, of just struggling to get ahead, the rat race, if you're going out of the fear that you don't matter, if that's what's motivating you, not the belief you have something to contribute, not the belief you have something to add, not the belief that you have potential that has to be maximized, but rather you want to prove that you're something and you're going to spend your life proving yourself to other people, and you have a chip on your shoulder, the teacher that said you won't amount to anything, the parent who failed to compliment you, and what you're going to do is prove them wrong. If you're motivated out of fear, go home, because you're not going to win that battle. You're going to lose the war, no matter how much money you make, no matter how much power you accumulate, no matter how much you rise politically, you will still feel like you're an absolute nothing, a zero. But if you go out into that war because you believe that goodness has to triumph, that you're a soldier in an army of righteousness, that you have something to contribute to make this world better, you're prepared to battle the demons, to battle the darker forces, not to prove yourself, but because you live for a purpose larger than yourself. You already know that you're significant because you have something to give, then you are going to win. And that's why the priest says to the soldiers, you know, it's the little things in life that we never really appreciate. And the priest says, if there's a woman out there who you're engaged to, you're in a relationship with, but you haven't yet dedicated yourself to her fully, if you haven't given yourself to relationships, if you haven't understood that being is what gives us significance and not doing, go home. Your fear, your cowardice is going to be infectious. If you have a house and you haven't consecrated it, if you have forgotten that the little domestic details that we so often dismiss as irrelevant, that what really matters is being in the office and being away from our children and being a workaholic and proving ourselves and doing and accumulating this game of accumulation as if we're still hunter-gatherers after thousands of years of human development. All we still believe is that we're here to put more zeros in our bank account and buy bigger toys and more cars. If you have a house that you haven't consecrated, if you haven't made the home a place that's special, if you haven't really hallowed your relationships, appreciated your children, your spouse, your parents, your friends, go home, man. You're going to lose the battle. And finally, if you have a vineyard you haven't consecrated, you know what we do with wine? And we do this every Friday night in my home, with my guests, with my family, with my children. We lift a glass and we toast l'chaim. We say, we give thanks for the little things, the friendships, the health of our family, the small acts of kindness that people practice with us, and we try to reciprocate. We raise that glass and we say l'chaim. If you have a vineyard that you have not consecrated, if you don't know how to appreciate those small things, if being means nothing to you because you're still so consumed with doing, then go home, man. Go home and learn the lesson of what really matters. When I was in Israel recently, my son, who serves in the IDF, we were there for my daughter's wedding. It was beautiful. It was in Jerusalem. There's nothing that can really capture what it's like to marry off a child overlooking the Temple Mount as the sun is beginning to set and seeing the lights of Jerusalem begin to illuminate and capturing that perfect moment of dusk where the lights are beginning to illuminate the holy city and you're marrying a child off. It was spectacular. And our son came home from the IDF to be at his sister's wedding. But the next day he had to go home. And he had to wake up early in the morning after being tired and dancing and so joyous of being with the family. And he had to put on the olive green uniform. And he had to put on his big, heavy backpack. And he had to wake up with circles under his eyes, as did we, me and my wife and my other kids, to say goodbye to him. And that's the hardest part when you have a child in the army, to say goodbye to them as they go back to their base. He was going to the Golan Heights. And as I saw the sadness on his face as having to depart his family again, to go and fight for a noble cause, to defend a struggling, tiny state, the only Jewish state which receives so much inexplicable hatred. As I had to say goodbye to him, I looked him in the eye and I said to him, Mendy, all the distance in the world can never separate people who love each other. Distance is such a weak opponent in the face of human love. And wherever you go, we're with you. You are never alone. Because your parents, this is being. You are our son. You never have to prove yourself. You never have to win, earn. You can just be. We're always with you. That's the beauty of human love. And that's the only remedy to human fear.